Today I'm going to be doing something a little different. I just wanted to talk about something that's been on my mind for a little bit. And that would be loneliness. The idea, the feeling, the emotion of loneliness. Now, I think it's a bit of a disservice to reduce it to a feeling or an emotion. As a concept, it's incredibly potent, familiar, and disturbing, even at times. In the past few days, about a week, I've surrounded myself with media depicting loneliness in one way or another. My previous video was on Bubble People, a person who so caught up in their own world, in their own kind of loneliness, only to meet another who opened up their mind, showed them light in a world of darkness, gave them quiet in a world of noise, and then to lose that again, and then to fall into the ultimate loneliness. I've also been rereading a manga called Oyasumi Punpun, or Goodnight Punpun. Honestly, it can be quite haunting. It's a haunting tale of a young boy growing up, going through the trials and tribulations of childhood and puberty and early adulthood. His obsession with women, his obsession with his own loneliness, how pathetic he views himself to be. It's really interesting in Oyasumi Punpun, where Punpun is a very self-limiting character. And if you've read it, you'll know what I mean. For those of you who haven't read it, I'll give a quick background. So, in Punpun's youth, his mother and father had a turbulent relationship. His mother was relatively unstable, and his father lost his job, became a drunk, and issues began to take hold in their household, which ultimately culminates into an instance of DV that leaves Punpun scarred, although not in any obvious and immediate way. But you can see it in his behavior. You can see how he changes. It was the beginning of his transition into his very dysfunctional adolescence and adulthood. His uncle comes to take care of him, and his mother's in the hospital, and his father goes far away, and he has to deal with abuse and neglect and really confusing sexual relationships with older women. He has to deal with love, a very, very toxic and strange relationship brought together because Punpun and his, lover were both incredibly broken people. And it's something that he can never forget. It's something he holds on to throughout the entire manga. He can't let go of it. He was in love with a girl in primary school. He couldn't have been more than 10, maybe 11. And he just can't forget her. And she's the child of a woman who falls prey to a cultish religious group. And so it's a bit of a grim existence. It'd be difficult not to feel alone when you have a neglectful, absent mother. Anytime you do interact with her, she's completely unpredictable. An uncle who hates himself, cheats on the woman he loves, sits around smoking, is also neglectful. A totally absent father. Friends who have also gone through pretty severe traumas, including death and parents taking their own lives. As I said, I think it'd be difficult to not feel totally isolated. To not see how every adult in your life, in some capacity, just kind of hates themselves. And not model yourself based on them. Because, kids, they tend to repeat what they see growing up. It takes someone really strong to break the cycle, because these things are subconsciously imprinted on us, planted into our brains. And if you want to be the difference, you have to recognize that the problem is there in the first place. But so many people, they refuse to do this. This is something you see in Punpun as well. He has this character who follows him that he calls God, which in reality is his, his internal monologue, or dialogue, I suppose you could call it. The God is the one who will come in to push him to do bad things, or will come to tell him he's pathetic when he needs something badly, where he's wishing for something good to happen. This God will tell him that he's being childish. It's this negative, brutal, cruel self-talk personified as a god. And he believes it. Punpun believes it at every turn. It's difficult not to see oneself in that. It's truly difficult not to see oneself in that. If someone says they really can't relate, they either have lived the most blissful life imaginable, or they're at the stage where they're still lying to themselves. And it's difficult to fight that negative self-talk. It's something we all have, and it's something you see reflected in real life. I suppose not to give out too much information, but my family has its problems, and I have a relative who can't come to cope with his problems. He doesn't always show it, but I assume he sees himself as weak. It's that kind of thing where you're in a relationship that's really bad. You're both broken, incomplete people. I don't want to say weak, because everyone's weak and everyone's strong. You view yourself as weak. You view yourself as not worthy. And you're in a relationship with someone who feels the same way. And so all you do is you hurt each other over and over and over, and you hurt yourself. You say, it was only just that one time. It was just that once. She'll change, he'll change, it'll all be different. And it never is. And you know it. You know that it never will be. You know it. But you still go. Because you can't imagine life without it. Because you hate yourself. And I can't say for certain that everyone has felt something like that. But I think most people will be able to relate that to something. Not necessarily a relationship. It could quite literally be an addiction. It could be just something you have complex feelings for. But I suppose the point I wanted to get to is that it's possible to break free. It's possible to genuinely internalize and wholly believe those cute little lies of goodness you tell yourself. oh, tomorrow's gonna be a beautiful, wonderful day, you say, miserable, exhausted, in bed. It's just a lie, right? At least you think it's a lie. And maybe you'll talk to yourself and say, oh, I'm just lying to myself. I know it's a lie. Why do I lie to myself? But inside you, there is the adult and the child. When you're lying to yourself like this, it's your child who is crying. It's your child who is sad, who wants something greater. And it's your adult that's telling the child, it will get better. It will be better. We'll make it better. But then, it's up to the adult to make that happen. And we see so many instances where people have their inner child just in pain, desperate, despondent, and the adult can't pull through. And I think that's where a lot of the pain of loneliness, in particular chronic loneliness, will come from. If one's in the world, surrounded by people, and they feel lonely, if they have love and they still feel lonely, it could be because they're surrounded by the wrong people. Very often, it's because they're surrounded by the wrong people. But that still means it's up to the individual to make themselves not lonely. You have to find your way out. There will be a way out. You have to find it. You can't sit around in self-pity, saying, well, yeah, my mom's abusive and bad, but she's all I have and I'm all she has, and if I leave her, then she's gonna be lonely and be in pain, and it's better to just be with someone who hurts you all the time than to be totally, truly, fully alone. I'll tell you this, it's not. It's not. We see it in Punpun. He feels really lonely. And he thinks the only cure to this is a woman, is sex. I wouldn't even say love. But really, when you peel that back, there's only one woman that he really wants. Only one. And it's going all the way back to the time where he bonded with her. About the time when that first trauma occurred. And I sit back and I wonder, in this world, people who have these severe issues with loneliness, with coping with these instances of DV or other traumas, if they simply haven't gone back and dug it out, went down to the root of that problem, thought about it deeply, didn't lie to themselves, allowed their inner child to be in pain and to hurt, and then also had their inner adult comfort and guide to come to the conclusion, to remove self-hatred, to move on from that. I just wonder if all of these instances, or many of these instances of chronic loneliness, maybe had a similar start. I'm not sure, because I used to feel a lot more lonely, and it took quite a while of very intense soul searching, painful soul searching, to find that genuine self-love within myself. As dramatic as it might sound, my traumas weren't too far off from Punpun's either. Not the same, but not too different. And so, I guess in reality, this whole spiel has had a bit of a selfish edge to it, no? I understand myself. I understand what I went through. I understand how I maintain it. And I'm seeing a bit of myself reflected in this boy. We could call it a parallel. I don't think our paths would ever converge in any meaningful way, because his conditions are very different, and he's also a manga character, and his methods of coping are different. But everyone's are. Everyone's are. Unfortunately, I think that leads some people to feel justified in claiming that they're misunderstood and that no one could understand and that nobody knows really what they're going through. Which I kind of take as a crock of bullshit, to be honest. You can call me cruel because I've already crossed that bridge. But I don't really have time for the nonsense and self-pity. I'd been there. Maybe I'd been looking for a little reassurance. But I took the problem into my own hands. And I set myself up with a life that would, more or less, I don't want to say cure myself of these problems, but prevent them from reoccurring, prevent them from being triggered. And I think that's what everyone with chronic loneliness needs to do. That's another recurring theme throughout Punpun. And frankly, in Bubble People as well. It kind of shows that the people who are so lonely in this way, because of trauma, because of some other thing, it's really not their fault, you know. It's not their fault the way they are, especially coming out of childhood or coming out of something where, like, you know, an institution, a system, like a schooling system, or something like this, where you're intended to follow and not necessarily be the primary driver of your own life. Once you come out of these things, it's understandable that you might not have a complete understanding of yourself. But you have to find it. You must find it. And you have to learn how to cope with the outside world, with reality, with yourself, with other people's traumas. You can't escape into other people. It's unreliable. You can barely escape into yourself. Even that will fall apart. So it's this self-pity, this almost deterministic view of yourself, where, oh, I'm destined to be alone. No one can love me. I'm a cruel, bad person. These self-limiting beliefs that ultimately keep you lonely. Even when you're surrounded by people who love you and are kind to you and are good to you and take care of you, you still feel lonely. Maybe you do need something a bit more, and that's fair. But maybe you should also be a little more grateful. Maybe that sounds a bit... I don't usually like saying that kind of stuff, because in my mind, it's kind of like, you know, fuck you, toughen up. I don't like that approach, but I guess I've come to find that there's a degree of truth to it. It's interesting in Punpun, to build off that last point. His uncle was a man who, for the past 5 years of his life, every action that he took had more or less been based on the pretense that an incredibly traumatic thing happened at his workplace. Something that tore his career apart, tore his personality apart, ripped apart his budding marriage. He ran away from it all and began to hate himself because he viewed himself as responsible. Every action more or less stemmed from that intense guilt and desire to run away and fear of hurting himself again, or fear of his actions hurting others. An intense fear, a self-imposed loneliness, which results in the hatred of the self, the hatred of others, the hatred of the world, only to go back to that workplace and figure out that actually everything turned out okay. So the last 5 years of his life were wasted on pointless guilt. He hadn't gone back to the workplace in those 5 years. He could have. He could have followed up and seen. But he didn't. And so he doomed himself to loneliness, to pain, suffering, anger, when he didn't need to. Had he just followed through, had he had the slightest bit of bravery immediately after this event, if he hadn't ducked away into the shadows and licked his wounds wallowed in self-pity, he would have seen that everything was fine. And so his world came crashing down. The last 5 years he had wasted in fear, when there was nothing to be afraid of. I think this is a trap we can easily fall into as people. We can fall into these traps of self-pity and a disbelief in the self. And it can sometimes appear as brash overconfidence or silliness or some other ridiculous form, sometimes in violence. We're used to seeing this in the United States and elsewhere, frankly. There was a huge, massive car attack in China just like a week ago. But loneliness is not necessarily selfish, but it can turn one to be selfish. Most of the times I can personally remember being lonely, very lonely, cripplingly lonely, were instances where I thought I deserved something more. I thought that I was missing out on something that was so cool and so awesome, where I let anxiety spiral out of control, and I was scared about the things I couldn't control. Breaking up with the first girlfriend, thinking about what she's doing, hearing she's hanging out with another guy. That's when you feel lonely. And that's when it's easy to turn to self-pity and easy to externalize this anger and anxiety and fear and jealousy. But it really stems from thinking you deserve them, thinking you deserve something. Any other time I felt truly alone was downplaying the role of my friends. People, beautiful, lovely, wonderful people who care about me, make me laugh, take care of me, I take care of them, pay for each other, go places together, have a genuine connection. There's a time I felt lonely where I said, that's not enough. That's not enough for me. I need more. I need something else. Can you imagine having the best friends in the world sitting back and saying, you're not enough. I need more. How selfish is that? How self-absorbed? How self-pitying? And this isn't to hate on myself. It's simply pointing out a fact. At least in my life, a lot of that loneliness felt like that. But loneliness is different from, I guess, lonesomeness or being alone. Loneliness is typically a very negative experience based in wanting more, based in desire. Where being alone is exquisite. It's peace, it's bliss, it's joy, it's something so immensely powerful, where your mind and your soul is as open as the sky, or like you're out on the ocean and anything could appear over the horizon. And it's there where you can finally see aspects of yourself, and you can finally feel the love for yourself. I always see something in me. I'm not sure if it's myself or, my quote-unquote true self, or if it's some kind of imaginative manifestation of what I believe myself to be. But it hides. It hides behind the door. I get a peek of it and it ducks away. And it's just me. It's quite literally me. But it's always hiding. And I always talk to it. I say hello. I tell it how things are going. And it never responds. At least not with words, but I can feel it. I can feel its response. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's something that I can find when I'm alone. I just chalk it up to me talking to me. Certain parts of me still being a mystery. Something else for me to explore. What was it? We're too late to explore the world. We're too early to explore space, but we have memes, we have this. You always have yourself. You just have to be brave enough to dive in. You have to be brave enough to face the loneliness, to face the entitlement, to face the anger, the trauma. There's a lot to explore in there. There's a lot to find. And even if you think you don't have much, you'll be surprised. You'll be very surprised what you can find. At least that's true in my experience. I think I might have to call it there. I don't quite feel like I said everything that I'd like to say, but I still think it's comprehensive enough to put out. I guess those are just my thoughts on loneliness, on what it is to be oneself and to become oneself. That's always the important part, the becoming, not just the being. That's something else I think many of us tend to overlook. We're not being, we're becoming. So I suppose, keep that in mind. Think about it for a bit. Find a place to be alone. Turn off the phone, turn off the video. Just try to sit with your own thoughts. Be lonely. Be bored. See where it takes you.